Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today I'm going to share a Bible journaling process with you using the new Grace collection from Felicity Jane. I do have an unboxing of this entire collection. I will link it down below if you want to see what all comes in there. And there will be a corresponding blog post for today's post over on the Felicity Jane blog. So I'll have that link down below if you want to see more close-up photos of the project. So Felicity Jane is not a Bible journaling company. They are a scrapbooking company. But I love challenging myself to use the products in my Bible journaling. A lot of times there are things that work perfect for it. Like this month we've got, tabs and some really pretty die cuts and things like that that will work for Bible journaling. And so since it's titled Grace and we're talking about grace, I thought what better way to use it than to journal about grace. So as I'm looking at the stamp set, this is one of my favorite items in the collection this month. It was hard to choose what my favorite was because there's so many good pieces, but I think this is going to be a stamp set where I get a lot of use out of it. And so I was looking at some of the elements. I was also looking at this journaling card here that says, "Wherever life plants you, bloom with grace." And that kind of helped me run with where I ended up. And so initially I was just going to use the journaling card, but then I decided to go ahead and just use the alpha stickers, and then I also used the Reagan die set, and I'll use the stamps as well to cut out some letters out of some of the pattern papers from the collection this month. And I'm going to put together my title using this quote, but I'm going to assemble it with those items there and using this Bloom with Grace stamp. So then I thought, okay, where are we going to put this in my Bible? Where does it talk about blooming? Where does it talk about grace? And so I was thinking about that phrase, bloom where you are planted. But when you Google that, there actually is no scripture in the Bible that says bloom where you are planted. The idea of blooming and that whole theme is in here, but that word for word, that's nowhere in the Bible. That's just something that's kind of come about over time, and we kind of think about it or assume that it's in the Bible, but it actually isn't. And so I was like, okay, well now where am I gonna take this? So I decided to go ahead and Google some verses about grace. And the very first one that comes up is 2 Corinthians 12, 9 through 10. It says, "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore, I will most gladly boast all the more about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may reside in me. So I take the pleasure in weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and in difficulties for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong." And I love this. I think this is so timely for right now. I know I keep saying that in my videos, but it just tons and tons of little God winks. And this is how I'm getting through this whole shelter-in-place pandemic craziness, is leaning into scripture, finding the truths and promises that God has in here for us, and getting my comfort and my peace from that. And so here, we are definitely in a hardship. We're going through a difficulty. Many of us might feel weak. We might feel anxious. And this is a perfect time to bloom, grow. This is a perfect time to let God shine and show up in big ways in our lives. And it's in those moments where we are our weakest and we are struggling the most, where we can't do it on our own. God has to step in and give us that strength. And so I look back on my many hardships and weaknesses and failings and things like that, and I can see the ways where when I step aside and let God take the reins and take control, he does miraculous, amazing things. And so in those moments where we're weak, that's where he steps in and he is strong for us. And so blooming with grace, right wherever you are, growing and shining and just being the best that you can be in whatever situation that you are currently in. And so I wanted to do some journaling about that. So we're going to use the stamp set. Like I said, I've got some alpha stickers. We're going to be doing some layering with the floral stamp that's in here. I've also got a little piece of the Essentials grid paper. I will link this down below. It's separate from the kit, but I also have some patterned paper from the Grace collection this month. And then for the background, we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're just going to do some Neocolor smushing technique on the background. I think that will work just fine. And yeah, we'll just throw this together pretty quick here, I think. So let me go ahead and put you guys on fast forward and we'll get this entry put together. Okay, so I'm going to start out with my background. I'm going to spray a little bit of water on the page, and then I'm also going to spray some water on some plastic packaging, and then scribble the Neocolor crayons out onto that water to create a paint that I can smush onto the page. I'm using salmon pink, carmine and golden ochre. This first layer with the pink was a little bit too light, so I'm just going to go back in and add some additional color. I want it to be really light in the background, but it needed to at least be seen. I am trying to dry in between the layers, that way the colors don't necessarily mix. I want them to be more layered. So you'll see I off camera dry it. I don't dry it 100% all the way just because I'm impatient, but I try to dry as much as I can. And just smushing it and making a mess. This does make it really wrinkly, but once the Bible has been closed for a little while, that page will smooth back out. Now for the carmine color, I didn't want a whole bunch of that because it is a really intense color, so I'm just creating a little puddle of paint that I can pick up with my paintbrush and then dab that around the page. So you could use these crayons just like watercolor if you wanted to. All right, now it's good and dry, we can move on to assembling things. So I went ahead and pre-pulled my alpha stickers and just have them on some freezer paper, but I'm going to transfer those over to that piece of striped pattern paper from the Grace collection. I'm not going to make you watch me stick down stickers. For the ones that I die cut out using those Reagan dies, I'm going to run those through my Xyron sticker maker and turn them into stickers so that they're easier to stick down. You just kind of rub the surface here to make sure that the adhesive is only on the back of the letters, pull off that top piece of plastic, and now it's a sticker sheet. But before I stick those down, I do want to go ahead and stamp the coordinating Reagan stamp on top. I find that this set is much easier to die cut first and then stamp. That way I can see exactly where I'm lining things up and make sure I'm getting them as even as possible. They end up being a little wonky, but that's okay. I'm going to tape down the strip of letters just so it stays in place while I'm stamping it. So, and then I went ahead and transferred those over to that striped pattern paper as well. And I'm going to outline my stickers, just trying to bring in some contrast. I know that I'm going to do some black stamping later, so I'm just trying to add more black details here while I'm going along with this page. So, and this just helps those alpha stickers kind of pop out. I love the mint color of those that come in the Grace collection, but they are kind of a lighter color, and so I want to make sure that they don't get lost on the page. I'm taking one of these tonic distress tools and just running it along the edge. You could also just open up a pair of scissors and run the scissor blade against the edge. That's a little more dangerous, but it gets the job done. And it just kind of scruffs up the edge. I just wanted some texture. Because this page is going to be fairly simple, not a lot of elements, not a lot, too much going on, I wanted to make sure I, took the time on little details like that. So I'm going to set those aside for a second and work on the rest of my stamping. I am pulling out the stamp positioning tool to stamp these layered flowers for a couple different reasons. I want to stamp multiple, and it's easier to just do that in a stamp positioning tool, but also this particular ink that I'm using here, I have them linked down below. It doesn't give great impressions the first time I stamp it. I know with that color I need to stamp it multiple times, and so that's where the stamp positioning tool really comes in handy, because I can stamp it multiple times and it's the exact same place. Now I am stamping this on some of the Essentials white cardstock from Felicity Jane. That way my whites all coordinate with anything else that I'm using from Felicity Jane. I will have that cardstock linked down below for you guys. And I found it best for this particular stamp to stamp down the greenery first, and then I can just line up the flowers. I cut out that part because you have to get your head right over the top of them to make sure that they are lined up correctly. But again, that's where the stamp positioning tool comes in really handy, because I know it's right where they need to be, and I can ink them up. I'm using some fossilized amber Distress Oxide ink, and these are just so pretty. With just 2 stamp impressions, you get these really pretty layered florals that then you can fussy cut out and have additional die cuts. So that's kind of a fun little element there. Now I've got that little square of grid pattern paper. This is from the Essentials line as well, so that'll be linked down below. And I'm going to stamp out this sentiment that says, "This is what blank looks like." I'm going to ink that up with some VersaFine black ink. And it is meant to coordinate with the big, bold, black label stamps that are on that stamp set, but I'm going to use the Grace name stamp that's on the stamp set here in a second. But before I do that, I am going to stamp this little arrow bracket underneath. Because the stamp is so small, I found it easier just to hand stamp. Before I stamp Grace, I am going to add a little bit of color on here. So I'm just going to pick up some more of that golden ochre color and just add a little swash of it, just to kind of highlight where that word Grace is going to be. This piece wasn't going to really have a whole lot of embellishment on it, so I just want to add a little bit of color to it, just to kind of dress it up a little bit. So yeah, so each stamp set from Felicity Jane, usually the name of the stamp set, if it's a girl, is turned into a stamp, which I don't always have an opportunity to use, but this month, the word Grace, I know we're going to be able to use that quite a bit. So I went ahead and distressed the edges of that piece as well, just like I did my title pieces. And now we can start assembling. So I've pulled out that bloom stamp. I want to make sure that I get it on the page straight, and I want to stamp before I glue anything else down. That way I don't mess up my stamping impression. So I drew myself a little line to make sure it's straight, kind of made sure I knew where everything is going to be laid out and where I needed to stamp that down. And then I could stamp that bloom with Grace sentiment. I'm trying to be quiet because the boys are doing youth group on a Zoom chat in the other room next to me, which is just awesome that they get to do that, but I'm trying not to interrupt them. All right, so to stick these down, I decided to go ahead and add some foam adhesive to the back just to pop them up a little bit. This does add some dimension, so if you don't want that in your Bible, then you can skip this step. I am working in the illustrating Bible, so I can add chunk in here. There's room for that. And I wanted some different layers. These words were a little chunky with being on those pattern papers, which is what I wanted, but I kind of want to break up the layout a little bit. I don't know any other way to explain that other than in my brain it made sense to elevate some of the pieces and then tuck the little florals and things behind there. And I kind of had a hard time with the length of these words and the way they turned out, trying to fit everything in without having any weird empty spaces or covering up something. You'll see here in a minute, I fast forward it so you can see all the different things I try out to try to embellish this. There's a little odd blank space trapped between that flower and the E in life, and it's going to drive me bonkers, and I will fix it here in a second. But for this flower, I was going to stick it here and then realized it's going to cover up the whole part of chapter 12, and that's not what I wanted. So I'm just going to add adhesive to the bottom part of the floral die cut. That way the top flowers I can lift up and still read the text underneath. So here's what I'm talking about. I'm trying out a whole bunch of different things, trying to fill in that weird little corner space. I don't know. Now that I'm watching it back, it really is not that bothersome. But when I was working on it and had my face right up against it, it was driving me nuts. I don't know. So we're going to try out the puffy stickers. We're going to try out die cuts. We're going to try out stamps. We're going to try out everything, trying to figure out what's going to work in there. I end up landing on these chipboard hearts. There's 3 of them. They are super adorable and cute. I probably would have hoarded them if I hadn't just committed to using them. I'm so bad about that. How about you guys? When there's something, a piece that I really like and feel like it needs a special project, I just hoard it and then I never use it, which is silly because then I end up with 10 tons of things that don't get used. But here we are, we're committing, we're using these. I'm going to add one to this little piece here, and I'm going to add a staple to it. Again, just bringing some embellishment. Also want to make sure that it stays attached to that paper. Chipboard, I just always want to make sure I add a good amount of adhesive to it in my Bible so that nothing falls apart. Time for a tab. Of course I have to use one of those tabs. Those are amazing. So I'm going to add one of those Remember chipboard pieces onto there, and then I'll add some more staples on it as well. These are really nice thick cardstock, and so they're going to hold up to whatever you want to embellish those tabs with. And they have adhesive on the inside, which is perfect, amazing. So I'm going to pull the adhesive and stick that down on the top there. I'm going to go ahead and add my date stamp down at the bottom, and that is going to be it for the entry. So I'm going to flip this over so you can see what the back looks like. There was a little bit of bleed through from that carmine pink and from my stamp, but nothing I can't cover up. I'm not worried about it. So there's a look at the finished page. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those down below. Check out the description box for links to everything that I used today. Also, head on over to the Felicity Jane blog to check out more close-up photos and the blog post over there. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.